Hello and welcome to the Unit 2 Section 2 video on solving 1 and 2-step inequalities. So in the last section we talked a little bit about how we graph our solutions once we have them. Now we're actually going to have to find the solution before we can graph it. So solving inequalities are very much the same as solving inequations. Remember, the only difference is you may have to flip the inequality if you divide or multiply by a negative number. Also, when you finish solving, you want to make sure your variable is on the left, so you may have to flip the inequality, the whole inequality. So let's take a look at some examples, starting with example 1. So to solve this, just like we did with an equation, we're going to subtract 1 from each side, and that's going to give us p is greater than or equal to -4. Now, once we have our solution, we can graph it. We know we're going to have a closed dot at -4, and we know that we're going to the right. Let's take a look at number 2. We're going to divide each side by 4. And that gives us 11 is less than r, but the variable's on the right-hand side, so we need to flip it to get the variable on the left. And now from here, we can graph it. We have an open dot at 11, and our graph is going to the right. For number 4, we are going to subtract 2 from each side. So you can tell that these are all one-step equations because they take one step, or one-step inequalities, because they only take one step to solve. So here we have n is less than -9. We're going to put an open dot at -9, and we are going to graph to the left. For example 5, we're going to multiply each side by 7. And when you do that, you're going to get n is less than -98. You can use your calculator to find out what -14 times 7 is. So we're going to have an open dot at -98, and we are going to graph to the left. For number 6, we're going to add 7 to each side. That gives us b is less than or equal to -18. And then we're going to do a closed dot at -18, and we're going to go to the left. A little tip for you: if you get a number that is not on the number line that you're using to plot your solution, that may key you in that your answer is not correct, and you may need to double check your math. All right, here we add 13 to each side, and we get -8 is less than n. But remember, we got to flip the whole thing to help us with our graphing. We have an open dot at 8. Let me get that a little bit more on the -8. And then we are going to graph to the right. All right, next we're going to divide each side by -10. And when we do, remember, because we're dividing by a negative, we have to flip our inequality. And that gives us 16 on this side. Since we're greater than or equal to, we are going to fill in our 16, and we're going to go to the right. And then finally, for the last one, we've got -7 divided on each side. That's going to give us 10. We divided by a negative, so we have to flip the inequality. And then we got to flip the whole solution to get the variable on the other side. So we've got x is greater than 10. Well, it means we have an open dot at 10, and we're going to graph to the right. Solving two-step inequalities, pretty much the same as solving one-step inequalities. The only difference is it's going to take 2 steps to solve instead of just 1. So let's do some examples of these. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to add 8 to each side. Oops. Let's do this. Add 8 to each side. And when we do, we're going to get negative 18 on the left-hand side. We're going to get negative 2n on this side. And then when we divide each side by negative 2, that's going to give us 9 on this side. We divide it by a negative, so we have to flip our inequality. And we get 9 is greater than or equal to n, but we have to flip the whole thing to get the variable on the left side. So we have n is less than or equal to 9. So we have 9 here, and we are going to graph to the left. For this one, we're going to multiply each side by 5 first. That gives us 10 plus p is greater than 10. Subtract 10 from each side, and we're left with p is greater than 0. So we have an open dot at 0, and we are going to graph to the right. Now, as we go to number 3, remember, this negative 7 that we're dividing by k, we're dividing k by negative 7, this is attached to the k. We need to take care of this 5 first, because this 5 has nothing to do with the k. So let's add 5 to each side. And when we do, we get k over negative 7 is less than 2. And then we're going to multiply each side by negative 7. Now, because we're multiplying each side by a negative, we're going to have to flip the sign. So k is greater than negative 14. So now we have an open dot at negative 14, and we're going to graph to the right. For example 4, we're going to subtract 7 from each side. That's going to give us 6x is less than 66. And we divide each side by 6, and we get x is less than 11. So 11 has an open dot, and we're going to the left because we're less than. For example 6, we're going to multiply each side by negative 2. So you've got a plus 4 is greater than or equal to 10. Now, what did I do wrong here? Can you catch what I did wrong? So the thing that I did wrong here was I did not flip my sign. Remember, when you multiply each side by a negative, you have to flip the sign. Then we're going to subtract 4, and that gives us a is less than or equal to 6. So we're going to fill in our dot here at 6, and we're going to go to the left. For example 7, we're going to start by subtracting 5 from each side. So that gives us 6 is less than or equal to negative 6a. Divide each side by negative 6, and we are going to get negative 1. We're going to get a on this side. Can you think of what the inequality is going to be? Because we divided by a negative, we are going to have to flip our inequality. So we will end up with greater than or equal to. But remember, we also need to get the variable on the other side. So we're going to flip the whole thing now to get our final solution. And with this final solution, we can graph a closed dot at negative 1, and we are going to face left because we're less than or equal to. All right, for this example, we're subtracting 7 from each side. So that's going to give us negative 2 is less than n over 5. Then we're going to multiply each side by 5. That's going to give us negative 10 is less than n. And we flip our whole solution. So we're going to have an open dot at negative 10. And we are going to head into the right. And for our final example, we are going to add 1 to each side. First, let me see if I can make that line a little bit straighter. That leaves us with r over 3 on this side. We have negative 3 on this side, and then we multiply each side by 3. So r is greater than negative 9. So we are going to have an open dot at negative 9, and we are going to shade to the right because we are greater than. So that concludes this section about 1- and 2-step inequalities. You'll notice it's very similar to what we did with the 1- and 2-step equations. You just have to remember those couple of rules that are specific to inequalities. All right, coming up in the next section, we will talk about multi-step inequalities, which just takes what we've already been doing and we'll take it up to the next step where we have to combine like terms and distribute some.